Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is one that took me by surprise. Uh, I hadn't heard any news on this. I heard of Bethesda's rumored hashtag 160. Like last week they released a couple of screenshots that were no one could really make heads or tails of what it is. Now that you've seen the trailer for Wolfenstein: The New Order, it makes sense. But people were trying to guess what the hell that was going on. What they were teasing something they were going to announce. Nobody really was calling for this. Now, ZeniMax, which owns Bethesda, acquired id Software in 2009. So that's 4 years, and we hadn't really seen much movement on that. It's still around, actually. But it's kind of weird to see one of their core franchises now is seemingly taken over by Bethesda. When it was acquired, it was kind of assumed that this Bethesda is kind of a holding company. It makes money by just having companies underneath its umbrella, and they get to basically run themselves, do their own thing. They just have to send profits up to mama. But ZeniMax really doesn't manage its corporations that it owns. So it's kind of the case, as long as you're making some money, they're happy with you. So people at the time were kind of wondering what was going to be the relationship. But a lot of people just assumed id Software was going to function separately from Bethesda. Perhaps there'd be some resource sharing, some developmental stuff. If Bethesda, develops some sort of tech, patent-wise or something, it wouldn't have to worry about paying the patent fees or something. Make everything cheaper for the mama corporation. But the fact that Bethesda really kind of took over the franchise this is an interesting backstory is in here somewhere. I have a feeling the Bethesda guys, once that was acquired, eventually really wanted to do Wolfenstein or something, or this what's being done with these franchises. Let us do it. And Bethesda being a huge moneymaker for ZeniMax probably went okay, and basically id Software probably could just, at that point they could say jack shit, because parent company wants this done. But I'm happy, you know what? Bethesda is one of the best gaming studios around right now, especially for single player, and that is something that I want to add to this trailer reaction. There's also been a press release done where apparently Bethesda has confirmed this is not multiplayer is not included in this game, which is a big step, really, considering how Bethesda itself is not a big first person. It's not first person. They're huge first person RPGs, especially. But they're not a multiplayer fan. They don't like doing multiplayer. I think they really like to immerse themselves in the world and the story, and it shows. I mean, look at Skyrim, the Fallout series. These guys kind of know what they're doing. But I think I've kind of gotten a little off track there. So we'll get back on with the whole hashtag 1960 thing. People were guessing what it was, and nobody thought it was going to be Wolfenstein. So when this came out and it was Wolfenstein, it took me by surprise. I hadn't heard any movement. I kind of thought maybe the Wolfenstein franchise had gone back into hibernation again. For those of you unfamiliar with the Wolfenstein franchise, and if you consider yourself a gamer, shame on you. Wolfenstein literally started the first-person shooter. I think there might have been something before it somewhere, but it was right around the same time period, and Wolfenstein was the one that really made it popular. It was the first successful first-person shooter. I remember playing it back on my computer back in, I think, 93. I think that's when I got a first computer. It was 93 or 92, and one of the games on there, in fact, this is one of the first PC games I played, was Wolfenstein 3D, which is actually the third in the game. It's kind of weird how Wolfenstein actually started off as like a Metal Gear-esque stealth action game. Yeah. Way before Metal Gear, too, all the way back in 81. But 92, they actually had come up with the idea of doing 3 dimensions using sprites, and it was a huge success, and that led them to enable to then do a bigger project. You might have heard of it. It's called Doom. Anyway, the franchise, they had their Spear of Destiny line, and then it sat frozen for a good decade almost when they finally released Return to Castle Wolfenstein, followed up by Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. There was an attempt. They did Wolfenstein RPG as well, which was kind of like the Doom RPGs, I think. Then they kind of did a relaunch with. Well, it wasn't even a relaunch. Yeah, they just got. I hate it. There's something with the naming conventions and marketing when they did Wolfenstein, which, granted, there hasn't been a game just called Wolfenstein. You have Castle Wolfenstein, Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, Wolfenstein 3D, Spear of Destiny, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, Wolfenstein the RPG, and then they just went Wolfenstein. It's like I hate when they do that because they make it think like they're refreshing. No, acknowledge your history, man. Which was a different take on it. And I don't think that was as successful as they were hoping. I know a lot of people liked Return to Castle Wolfenstein. I love that game. That was a fun playthrough, and it was also, ironically, when we're talking about multiplayer, that was one of the things. It was for the Xbox at least, it had multiplayer, and a lot of people really liked the multiplayer in that. And now we have Wolfenstein: The New Order, which, if you've only seen the trailer, it doesn't really tell you everything that we got from more additional releases and people kind of explaining it, especially with the idea of the hashtag 1960. And before we get into this isn't the first time we went down an alternate history route, and I'll get into that in just a second when we get into the Astrostein series. Yeah, so in the trailer it shows like big industrial building war machines, and then in the end it's with the overtones, the guy talking, and it's been a while since I was away. And meantime, they took over the world, and remade it. They forget one thing, they forget me. And it shows, of course, these walking war robots playing to all along the watchtower, and one guy standing up to them. When it looks like London, you can see the swastikas flying in the background, and then it goes, boom, Wolfenstein: The New Order, which looks awesome. It's basically an alternate history game where the Nazis won World War II. It works actually within the Wolfenstein. Apparently, this is a carry-on, I think, to some degree, of the Wolfenstein plot from starting with Return to Castle Wolfenstein. With the, I think with the character Death's Head. Basically, this is kind of showing if, with the Nazi super science they've been developing, and apparently if B.J. Blazkowicz is in there somewhere, and with the Nazi super science, the Nazis won World War II. And the film, the game is supposed to take place in the 1960s in a Nazi-occupied world, where the Nazis are running everything, and they, of course, have the crazy Nazi super science. That's where the character Death's Head, who was introduced in Castle Wolfenstein, or Return to Castle Wolfenstein, it's kind of like the big Nazi mad scientist who can create all this crazy stuff. I remember that game he was creating like biomech creatures, crazy weapons. Yeah, very, very kind of like Hydra from Captain America. And so you can kind of, normally if you go Nazis winning World War II, you're like, how? Because historically and militarily, when you look at the Nazi situation, they were going to lose against the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union just had too much to throw at them. I mean, maybe they had a hairball's chance in killing Stalin if they had sacked Moscow quick enough and somehow like cut him off in there. And then maybe whoever took over could have sued for. That's probably your most realistic looking. One, you have to assume that they don't bother the West. They just attack the Soviet Union. Or they never attack the Soviet Union. Even then, they still have the U.S., which is eventually going to come. Yeah, so normally I kind of cringe at this alternate history stuff, but with the Wolfenstein series, it shows they have enough crazy science that it's clearly, okay, maybe the guys in World War II that can create the freaking weird bio super soldiers, okay, that is a bit of an advantage. I'll give them that. And ironically, this isn't even going to be the first Nazis have taken over the world alternate history game anyway. There was that Turning Point Fall of Liberty, which I own, which took place in the 50s with the Nazis took over. That was more just they didn't have as good of an excuse in that one. That was more or less like the U.S. remains incredibly isolationist, and Winston Churchill got killed years earlier. It doesn't really explain why the Russians weren't able to just, butt fuck Nazi Germany, but okay. This one looks a little bit more fun, and considering how they've gone with Bethesda and their storytelling, it's going to be interesting to see how this game really plays out. We haven't, this is a trailer, teaser cutscene. I can give the quote from our Wikipedia page here. Let's see here. The game takes place in 1960 in alternate history where the Nazis won World War II. Players assume the role of protagonists William B.J. Blauskwitz, I just pronounced his name, and are tasked with launching an impossible counteroffensive against the Nazi powers that have taken over the world. Set in Europe, the New Order will have players infiltrating Nazi strongholds and battling legions of enemies while taking control of super weapons that the Nazis have used to dominate Earth. So, there's that. Not exactly telling us how the gameplay is going to be. I mean, probably first-person shooter. It's Wolfenstein. You have to make it first-person shooter now. It created the genre. Obviously, we're going to have some mech stuff. It's going to show you we have some crazy, probably very creative weaponry. Mostly in Europe. Who knows? There might be a New York level in there somewhere. But the trailer, it did look like at least part of it was set in London. We saw a little bit of a burning down Eiffel Tower, so maybe France too. Let's see. On the technical side, it says the machines will utilize id Software's proprietary game engine, id Tech 5, which... Let's see. What does id Tech 5 run as well? It's basically the system that they're working on for Doom 4... and they used for Rage. And I didn't play Rage. Kind of weird because I do tend to like the way id games. But Rage was really disappointment from at least financially. I think was one of the reasons why they got acquired. When was that released? It was released in 11. And it certainly was. They were hoping for that to be a much bigger hit than it was, and it really wasn't that much of a hit at all. No word if Carmack has any involvement with it. It's kind of weird. Like I said, obviously it goes back what I said earlier with the sharing of technology between id and Bethesda. My guess is maybe this is just a case where, unlike Gearbox, id realized we can't have too many projects at once. I wonder if anybody else wants it, and maybe somebody at realized they kind of really hopefully they realized they couldn't do more than one project. Like, they knew their limits, so Bethesda kind of jumped up and went, ooh, let us do it. Now, technically, this is being done by a studio called Machine Games, which is a developer. Looking at their this is the only game actually listed of theirs. They're a Swedish-based company, founded in 2009. Interesting date there. But a lot of the people from the studio apparently worked on the Riddick games and Darkness, which I did not play. It is okay, and they were acquired by Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax. So once again, we have another. It's kind of weird how ZeniMax operates. It seems like technically these games aren't all these companies aren't aligned under a hierarchy like this, but it seems like they are. It's very unusual how it's set up. Just by looking at that, you have Bethesda as a publisher working with another company on another company's license, and it just functions. Normally you need some sort of structure with this stuff, and who knows, maybe unofficially there is. I don't work for ZeniMax, so I have no idea. But I'm excited for this. I love this kind of alternate history stuff, and there is no super science quite like Nazi super science. Especially now we have Nazi war mechs. Come on, man, that's awesome. I'm sure we're going to see some crazy technology. It'll be interesting when in the 60s this takes place. Um, it says here during 1960, so maybe it will. But the music they use all along the Watchtower, which is not. 60s is one of those decades where there's a big distinction between early 60s and late 60s. Like 1965, huge difference after 1965. Early 60s is the 50s 2.0. Late 60s are its own thing, man. But I wonder how much of that influence. Are we going to have more like classic 60s music in there? We can have like those classic themes from the 60s of like Revolt and all that stuff, Youth in Revolt, which would fit. I'm also wondering how the gameplay is going to be storyline wise. We have, of course, as it said, experience grew mostly from the Riddick games. Those were very well, one of the few times we had a licensed product that actually came out with a really good game. Butcher's Bay. I like that game. I never finished it though. Was it ever have those games where you like beat 70% of the game and just you stop playing it for whatever reason, and you just never got to it, and then you don't want to pick it up because you're so far in, but you haven't played it for so long you've lost all your like reflexes of knowing what every button to hit. I hate when that happens, because it's not even it's just that you don't want to have to relearn the controls again, because it's always insanely hard because you forgot. But I digress. I'm excited for this thing. I'll be keeping an eye out for it. Gonna obviously look for some better details. It is coming quickly, though. It looks like it said Q4 2013, which it means it's kind of around Christmas time, I believe. It's business quarter, so that's always off. It always depends on. It also varies a little bit depending on the company. Let's see here. A quick Google search says if they're going by like the tax quarter, I mean, there's always a little bit of variation in this, but we're looking October 1st through to December 31st, which is right there in your in your holiday season. I wouldn't be surprised if this is an October release. Although if it was an October release, I would have expected more push. But Wolfenstein always fits in with October. You've got Nazis, undead. Though this looks like it might not be as much with the mystical stuff. There was kind of always that element that they've been putting in the recent games where there's this technological versus within the Nazi party, like the techno guys versus the more mystic guys. We have only had a quick trailer, so it looks more like it's the tech stuff, but who knows? Maybe they'll add a little bit of the freaky Nazi paranormal. I think I've gone enough about this. I'm looking forward to the game. I keep an eye on it. Of course, waiting to see gameplay footage is always the most important thing. I would probably E3. We're going to see something big on that. Because if they're pushing this already for a Q4 release, they're looking for an E3 release. It's just kind of weird that they kept it so quiet for so long. Normally, you start hearing about games a year out, if not 2 years out. It's just kind of weird that this has come so quickly. I want to know how long this has been in development. If Bethesda has really just been keeping this under wraps. Are they going like the J.J. Abrams route? Which, by the way, maybe this is a better way to do it. I mean, let's face it, movies normally only have they take only like good 6 months at most to pump up hype for their games. So maybe by doing this, they're trying to avoid what happened with Gearbox by putting stuff out way too early. I don't know. We'll find out. Signing off for now.